next panel before we break for lunch. We're going to get some of those over 40 drivers that are in the room with us. We're going to have them start speaking on their experience and their path to being a racing driver. Drivers, how they got there. This panel is presented by Sound Gear. Most racing drivers might follow the same path or have the same background, but that's not the case. Each driver's story of how they first became aware of motorsports, then what happened to set that tone, to decide to pursue it, and then who, how, and what happened along the way to enable them in having a career in racing is always different. We're going to hear from champions in various forms of motorsports. To kick things off, John Dunan's hero is the moderator of this panel. Lynn St. James will join us on stage. As a racing driver, Lynn set 21 national and international speed records and was a 7-time competitor in the Indianapolis 500, earning Rookie of the Year honors in 1992. She's competed all over the world, including twice at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, with victories at the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona, the 12 Hours of Sebring, Watkins Glen, Road America, and the Nürburgring. She's a requested speaker on women's issues, gender equality, and diversity, and currently serves on the board of ACUS. Hi, there you are. First up from the drivers is Tatiana Calderon, who is a professional racing driver from Colombia, known for breaking barriers as one of the few female drivers to compete at the top levels of motorsport, including in IndyCar, IMSA, Pro Mazda, World Endurance, and Formula 2. She began her career in karting before advancing to single-seater racing in North America and in Europe. She's been working closely with the FIA Formula 3 and FIA Formula 2 to make the car more accessible to female drivers. Our second driver was recently announced to the Haas F1 2025 F1 Academy driver, Courtney Crone. Her interest in motorsports started by traveling around California with her dad and watching him run his own vintage racing team, which quickly became her favorite thing to do while growing up. She made her F1 Academy debut as the wild card entry in round 2 at Miami, narrowly finishing outside of the points in race number 2. Laura Hayes is the fastest woman at Pikes Peak Hillclimb and the director and driver of Thunder Bunny Racing. She was born into a family who loves motorsports. She's driven a variety of cars throughout her career, and she leads the motorsports division for the team she races for, Thunder Bunny Racing, which I believe that's you? That's your car? That's my car. Thank you for having that with us. In 2024 was her 3rd year competing in the Pikes Peak International Hillclimb. And rounding out our drivers panel is Isabella Robusto. She's a racing driver and part of the Toyota Racing Development Driver Program. As a rising star in the ARCA Menard Series, she had an impressive 10 starts with 6 top 10 finishes this season and earned a pole position at Kansas. She began her racing journey at just 5 years old and by age 6 was competing. She's currently an aeronautical engineer major at Arizona State University, having graduated high school a year early. Why am I not surprised, Isabella? Welcome.
Well, thank you very, very much. If you all don't know by now, this is like the thing I am the most excited about. You know, one of the things that I try to remind everybody, and I hope I'm not offending anybody out in the audience, but as much progress as we're making in all fields, in all areas for women in motorsports, the media and the fans, a lot of them really don't know about you guys, but what they do know about are the race car drivers. The race car drivers, men or women, are the ambassadors for the sport. They're the messengers. And, you know, we've made a huge amount of progress, but we're still struggling to put women in the winner's circle. I mean, to put women on the top of the podium. And so, not by lack of desire, not like lack of talent, not by lack of interest. It's really more a lack of numbers. We just don't have enough numbers out there, and everybody sort of knows that, has talked about it. And I don't have a solution, but one of the solutions is to highlight the women who are winning. Maybe not in Formula One, maybe not at an IndyCar yet, maybe not at a NASCAR Cup race, I mean, not at the very top levels, but at the levels that we can celebrate, that we need all of you to follow and become fans of, to celebrate, because the more we can elevate the drivers who are achieving success, and then hopefully will continue to move up the ladder and achieve more success, that you'll follow them and help that, because this is who we're relying on, to let everybody know, yes, there are women succeeding in motorsports. As John said, they don't know who's behind the wheel sometimes, but they do. They know who's standing on the podium. They don't know who's pushing the buttons and on the computers and all of that. And I mean, fortunately, more of that's happening, and they're paying more attention. But so these are 4 superstars. There are more than these 4, but these are 4 that we were able to get on their calendars and be able to spend some time with them, to be able to get some background. And I think their background, besides reading a bio, which is great, but to really get a sense of how they struggled and how they've made it to where they are. So, Tatiana, I'm going to talk with you. And I want all of you, and we've talked about this in advance, I really want you to talk about your background of success and the ladder. In other words, how, you didn't just say you were going to do something and then, you know what I'm saying? So just talk a little bit about your background and how you did what you did, how you got here.
Thank you.
Sorry, it'll come on. We don't have a mic working here. She's working right now? Yeah. We'll get that one fixed. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much for this space, and it's so important, like you said, the representation, giving us this space to share how we started, because I think sometimes we can take a lot of inspiration from that. I don't come from a family that used to race, so my dad loves his motorbikes and his cars, but he never really had the chance to race. So my sister, who's my manager and my best friend, she's sitting over there, Paula, she took me to a rental go-kart track near our house in Colombia. We bought a 5-minute ticket, and I really fall in love with the speed, with the adrenaline. So we were going there like every day after school, and my mom was still like trying to get me to tennis classes every Sunday, because she was like getting that hope that maybe I wouldn't be a race car driver at the beginning. Then she knew how much I loved it, and she started to, she knows all the drivers now, and how like the engineering side of things and everything. But we came from a country where Montoya was like 2-time IndyCar, Indy 500 winner. He was reaching Formula One, and I kind of took inspiration from that. I wanted to become a race car driver, and it's not easy, like, for my parents at the beginning to also like, okay, she's a girl from Colombia wanting to be a Formula One driver. We'll take things one step at a time. But I think I really discovered my passion. I would be lying if I said it was easy, because at the beginning, a lot of people were super smiley that they saw like 2 girls joining a racetrack. But the minute you start to be competitive, that's when things get really complicated.
What was the first level that you actually, won some races or became competitive? What level? Karting or what?
I was doing karting, easy kart, and it was by the time Rotax was getting really popular, so we were competing, but like a national level in Colombia. We have like 3 racetracks, so we would go clockwise and anti-clockwise and skip 3 corners, and that was sort of the championship. But I started winning there, and really like my parents started to see like, okay, we're gonna have to work really hard, because you know how expensive this sport is. And I started to come here to the US to compete in karting, and I won the Stars of Karting East Division Championship. And I think that was the time where my parents were like, okay, this is getting serious, and you're gonna get away from university at least for a couple of years to see if this works out. But it's been a tough road to also like accept. I think it's very important that we're female drivers, and of course the stopwatch never lies, but we are different. Our bodies are different. The way we think is different, and there's a lot of things that we as a community can do to change the narrative.
But I want you to hold that for later, okay? Because I really want to set the groundwork from everybody's. So from karting, you went to here, but then did you go to open wheel cars? Did you do, what was the sort of the ladder, okay, of competition and winning?
So after I did karting here in the States, I actually raced for Juncos Racing. At the time they had the karting team, and they were starting a Star Mazda at the time, but Pro Mazda now, championship. So I stepped up into single seaters. That was a huge jump, but I did 2 years there, had 2 podiums on my second year, and then I went to pursue my dream of becoming a Formula One driver. So I went to Europe. I started to compete in Formula 3 in Spain, then the FIA Formula 3, where Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Alex Albon were all competing at, and then I managed to jump into GP3, which was following, nowadays it's called F3, but it was following the F1 calendar, where I met Monisha Calderon, who was the team principal of Sauber Formula One team. She got me my first opportunity to be a development driver there, and then I went on to do Formula 2. I tested a Formula One car for the first time in Mexico in 2018. And then I went to Super Formula in Japan. I did the WEC for 1 season and the 24 hours of Le Mans, and then I came back to the States to do 6 rounds of IndyCar in 2022, and since then also been doing IMSA this year. So John has been a great promoter, and super happy to be here.
So this is about a 12 years, maybe, I'm guessing maybe a 12-year journey from the karting to where we sit today. Is that right?
It's crazy to think that, I've been racing for 21 years now, but
okay.
I don't feel that old yet.
Okay, but I'm just trying to put, the journey and the struggle from this and that, different parts of the world, different forms of motorsports. So thanks. That's kind of what trying to put a perspective on that. Courtney, now she's got one that should work now. Yeah?
I got a new one.
Got it right. You got a new one. So your journey also, you started very young, doing a lot of very different types of motorsports. But I know one of the things, because we've talked about it, is that you've always successfully get to this level, win at this level before you start going to the next one. So share that with us, please.
So Lynn did inform me I have to make this short because it has been a very long journey up until this point. But I got my start in racing when I was 5 years old in quarter midgets at our local quarter midget track in Southern California. My dad was always involved in motorsports. He owns his own prep shop where he preps and maintains vintage, primarily Formula cars for a living. And so when I was born at 2 years old, my dad took me over and put me in a little go-kart and on a motorcycle, and I think once he learned that I had the love and passion for it, kind of took off from there. So at 5 years old, I started racing locally at the quarter midget track and won just about everything there was to win in quarter midgets for about 5 years. I moved up progressively through the ranks in quarter midgets from the novice class. Basically, we tried to have a plan as best as we could that once I could win races or win a championship, I'd move up to the next class. And that was about a 5-6 year progression. And I got to about 10 years old. And my dad was like, well, this was great. I hope you had fun. And I don't have any money to take you to the next level. And I was like, wait, I'm not done yet. I have more to do. I want to win the Indy 500. And he said, well, that's up to you now. And at 10 years old, I I didn't really know what to do in the moment, so I called all his friends I knew that had more money than him, and I managed to get some sponsors, and he was still along for the ride to try and help me figure out what the next steps were, because we really didn't know what my next steps were going to be. I didn't have that funding to have a structured plan to get to IndyCar. So the next thing we knew is we were always going to speedway motorcycle races. So my dad got me a speedway bike, and I started racing speedway, which is, for those of you that don't know, it's kind of like
Explain that, what that is.
It's kind of like flat track, so it's dirt ovals on a special, very lightweight motorcycle, no brakes, just a clutch, 250 cc's, so they're pretty quick when you're about 11 years old, and started racing speedway and was very successful in speedway. And I think in that time period I kind of solidified that I really wanted to drive cars. I loved the motorcycles, but I was like, great, my passion is in cars. And at that time I was very fortunate to meet Wally Pankratz, who has been an amazing mentor to me throughout my life. And about the time I met Lynn, which was a confusing period of my time because I knew I wanted to race Formula cars, but I didn't know how to get there. So I ended up racing USAC midgets and sprint cars on both dirt and pavement. And that progression was a big step for me for what I had been doing, but thankfully it was quite successful and won a lot of races, won a sprint car championship. And with that, I actually got noticed by a Formula car team because I always made it mention that I wanted to race Formula cars. And World Speed had based in Sonoma, California, they had a scholarship that they had a shootout for, and I ended up winning that scholarship, and that's what got me my first full season in a Formula car at the age of 16. And basically went through the Formula cars for a couple of years, raced various junior Formula cars, their World Speed's Formula car, Formula Fords.
Had some wins and podiums, I know.
Yeah, had multiple wins and podiums and championships in the junior Formula cars. And basically I got to 2020 again and didn't know what I was going to do. And so at that point, I had a bunch of options in front of me, and I'm sure we'll get to this at some point, but part of the struggle nowadays is that there's so many series to choose from and pathways to go. I didn't know what to do next, and that's when I found LMP3 in the IMSA series. Thank you, John. And saw that series. It was amazing fit for me for my next progression, or at least at the time I thought it was. Looking back now, it was maybe quite a bit of a jump, but I'm happy I did it, and I got to be introduced into the IMSA family, where John was really fortunate enough, I was fortunate enough to be picked as the IMSA Diverse Driver Development Scholarship winner for the last 2 years. And creating that family in IMSA, it solidified my love for, again, road racing, and it's, I would say, a big contribution of that scholarship has been able to put my name out there and get this opportunity with the F1 Academy, and getting to go back into the Formula car is something that I didn't think was going to happen in this near of a future on such a big platform. So I'm just very excited to be back in the Formula car with the F1 Academy and Haas and ART, and get back to a very good basis of, you know, maybe in the car it's a step back from the LMP3, but in life and learning it's going to be a big step up.
Oh, thank you. Okay, Laura, you're up next. How did you get started and get you where you are here?
Yeah, we were talking about imposter syndrome, right? I'm definitely feeling it right now, being surrounded by these ladies.
Well, we've talked about
and
that.
You told me,
and
yeah,
so,
you're like, get over it.
When
So
you
it's
hold
like,
the record
okay.
for being the fastest woman on Pikes Peak, you are not an imposter, so okay, you just had a different journey. And
I've
that's
had a
what's so
different
interesting.
journey, and I'm saying it's an honor to be up here next to these ladies. So, yeah, my start and introduction to motorsports is thanks to my parents, and they got me introduced to the world of racing pretty much the day that I was born. So my parents, they met at the racetrack. My mom's brother, he raced short track cars in Northern California, And my dad is a mechanical engineer, and he never drove. So my mom, she's kind of crazy. She had motorcycles and stuff growing up. So I think I got the driving talents from her. I don't know how my dad gets to work some days, but he's really smart. And he built race cars, and he had people drive for him because he knew he wasn't super talented behind the wheel. But his cars were always really fast, and my mom took notice, and that's how they met. We had a little yard cart. I remember this day, they're like, let's see if Laura likes this stuff. And I remember being in the front yard and the throttle stuck wide open. And eventually I found the brake pedal. It took a little time, but I do remember being really scared, and I'm like, I don't want to do that again. But then a few years went by, and my parents took me out to our local quarter midget track, and just like you, we were introduced to the sport again, and I took a liking to it that day. And about a week later, I think we had our first quarter midget, and we definitely come from humble beginnings. So one quarter midget turned into two. We traveled to the racetrack, putting it in the back of my dad's daily, the truck, and the family van, the Toyota Privia, and we would show up and do well and leave with track records and trophies and wins and upset some people along the way. So that felt really good. And then we moved on to karting. So got into shifter karts eventually, which is probably still my most favorite vehicle to drive to this day. So we were successful there, became the first woman to win an IKF shifter kart national championship in California. So that was a really, really cool day. We raced the SCUSA Super Nationals. I remember finishing second to Connor DeFilippe. So he was even very good back then. If anybody remembers the Red Bull driver search back in the day, I won the first leg of that. So I have this really awesome picture of me on the top of the podium, and Alexander Rossi was second. And so he looked pretty upset in that picture, but I look back on it and I'm like, that was a good day as well in Laura Hayes racing history.
I never want to hear imposter syndrome out of your mouth again. Not with this kind of...
No, so I actually, at that time, I went through your driver development program when I was about 14, and for some reason, I wanted to go to Phoenix all by myself. I didn't want my parents there. That was my first time being on an airplane totally solo, but I, for some reason, just had it in my mind. I wanted to do that by myself. So then we were kind of at a crossroads where we were trying to make the decision, do we go the NASCAR route or do we go the Formula One route, right? Because that's what Alexander and his dad, they were planning on even at that time. So financially, it made more sense for us as a family to go the NASCAR route. It was a little less expensive. So then we got into USAC, Ford Focus, midget racing, sprint cars, late model stock cars, and that gave me the experience to apply for NASCAR's Drive for Diversity program. That's what allowed me to continue racing, because just like you, there came a day where my parents, they couldn't support me any longer. So after high school, I moved to the East Coast by myself and raced late models at South Boston Speedway in Virginia, and that was quite a culture shock coming from California to Virginia. But those were tough days. I was connected with a team who didn't have the best equipment. Financially, we didn't have the budget as some of the other drivers and teams, and it just wasn't a good year. They didn't really believe in me either as a driver. So yeah, it was tough, and it was difficult to find sponsorship at that time. So I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Do I go back to school? Do I go to work? Because all I've ever have done is drive. So that's when I got involved in instructing. I worked at the Richard Petty driving experience for a little bit, so those were good days in my early 20s. But that eventually led to instructing at the BMW Performance Center in South Carolina. And that is where I met a good friend who reintroduced me to racing, because there were a few years off that I had to take, and he was racing a Formula V. And if anybody knows what Formula Vs are, they're interesting little open wheel cars, and in the grand scheme of racing, it was something that I could afford. I was scraping up all my money to buy this car and go racing again, because that's obviously what I want to do. And so that got me back into racing, and I also met my team members and my family and my friends at Thunder Bunny Racing, so the car down over here to the side, we were all instructing together at the Performance Center. One of my buddies, Justin, he had a 350Z parked up in Chicago collecting dust, and all of these endurance series were starting to pop up, and like, hey, this is a way that we can all go racing together. So we put our money together and our resources and went endurance racing, and Thunder Bunny Racing has grown from there. People took notice of what we were doing on track and wanted to go racing with us, and the Nissans turned into BMWs, and the BMWs have now turned into GT4 cars, and we have this amazing business. I get to work with my best friends and go have fun racing cars across the country. So I'm very
Fantastic. I
fortunate.
mean, and happy you found where you still get to drive at the same time you're running an organization
Yes.
for other drivers
It's
and all
an
that. It's
interesting
to me, that's a fascinating way and journey and story. So thank you. Okay, Isabella, our brains. Not that I'm offending any of you up here, but this woman is. I mean, you're pretty. I know you're all smart, but I just somehow when I found out she's studying aeronautical engineering, graduated from high school a year early, and scared the heck out of me, girl. So. Talk about your journey, please, from the beginning to get you here.
Yeah, so I always say I won when I was born because I beat my brother into this world by an hour and a half. So I kind of started winning
On a winning
right out of the
journey
bat. Yeah, but started in go-karts when I was 5 years old. We did an entire year of testing before I actually started to race. Kind of continued that trend as I went up, but did a full year of testing. So when I turned 6, I started to race. I raced in Minimax, Micromax, and Mini Swift. Won and podiumed most every race that we raced in. Then eventually moved up to the K100s and the X30s throughout the years. And then same thing, won podium most of those races. And then we ran as much as we could up and down the East Coast. And when I was 7, while still racing go-karts, I got into a Bandolero, which, if you've never seen them, they're like little baby stock cars with a souped-up lawnmower motor is basically what it is. But tested those for a year as well. So then when I turned 8, I was old enough to race them, got into it, fired off running up front, getting wins, being on podium, championships, all of that, and continued to race that, won almost everything you could in the Bandoleros. And when I was 11, I had to be 12 years old to move up to the next kind of ladder, the next step up for like the stock car side. And we talked with INEX, who was like the sanctioning body for it, and they allowed me to move up to the Legend car a year early. So I started that when I was 11. I did not do the year of testing before I started to race it, which was very noticeable. The first year that I ran, I did not run very good, but come the second year, I applied for the NASCAR University program, very similar, but it was the youth program at the time, so it was just for Legend cars, and so ran with them. Ran okay, finished in the top kind of 3 and won a couple races my second year, and then continued with them for a second year in Legend cars. Ran very, very well, won Battle at the Big Top, won Nationals, won Worlds, did Summer Shootout, finished in the top 3 every single race, won a bunch of them. So basically, and Winter Heat, I got 9 out of 9 poles, which I think I'm still the only person to do, which that's pretty cool. But long story short, won basically everything you could kind of in Legend cars with the NASCAR University program. They decided to give me a chance the following year to get into a late model stock. That's unfortunately when COVID hit, so things kind of shut down at that point. So I only did 6 races for 2 years with them in late models. But even with cars that normally would kind of run 10th, 15th, 20th, not really up near the front, I was able to either podium or I didn't finish the race. If I didn't finish, I was on the podium in cars that normally wouldn't run up front. So that got the attention of Toyota. Kind of throughout those years, they had me come and test a ARCA car when I was 13. I was way too young to go and race that. I was very fast, but way, way too young. So they kept an eye on me. I didn't know they were going to keep an eye on me, but they did. So when I turned 15, they went and tested me again. Very similar results. Ran up front, did well, did my second year of late models. the day before I was going to sign contracts to go run with them for a third year of late models, Toyota called, said, hold on, let's talk. Long story short, ended up signing with Toyota. Started with them and when I was 17. First year, I ran just late model stock, so we ran multiple series. I did 33 races and finished in the top 3 29 times out of 33 and won a bunch. Finished second in 2 track championships, and we didn't run all the races, so ran really good in that. So they continued to help me the following year. So they put me in basically every type of car that you could run with Toyota. So I did GT4 with SRO and podiumed my first race in that. I did GR86, late model stocks, pros, and supers. So come April time, I was running Cars Tour, which is kind of the top level you can do for late models. Was running the pro race. I was in the lead with 1 lap to go, and we were beating and banging. Unfortunately, broke, hit the wall super hard, and got a really bad concussion and was out of the car for 10 and a half months. So Toyota stuck with me through all of that. It's was the longest year ever. It's also the only time I've never not been in a car since I was 4, so it was really eye-opening for me. But even through that, Toyota stuck with me. Come kind of February, March time, got back in. I did a test in an open wheel car that I've never been in. I think Glenn wants to talk later about it.
We're going to talk.
We'll talk all about that. That was kind of the first time back into a car, but my first oval race back was to finally make my ARCA debut. So I was hoping the year before that I was finally going to make my NASCAR debut. And ARCA didn't happen because I crashed. So finally made my ARCA debut. Ran up in the top 3 most of the race, and then ended up finishing 6th. I messed up the last restart, and we got caught out by rain, so couldn't race my way back up to the front, but had a really, really good kind of first ARCA race. And then even throughout this year, out of all the ARCA races I've done pretty well, run up front in most of them. I also became the first female to get a national NASCAR pole not on a super speedway, so that was cool. Also my first time on a 1.5 miles, so I ended up being the only one to hold it wide open is what it came down to. But
love looking at that graph that says you're flat, right?
Yeah. But also continued to run late model stocks and Cars Tour as well this year just to gain some more experience. But hopefully the goal is to run full-time ARCA, kind of continue up the NASCAR ladder. But just growing up, the main goal was to make sure I could win and compete for wins and championships on a weekly basis before you kind of went to that next step.
Which that is the point. I mean, we're looking at 4 young females, without getting into the specific ages, but anywhere from 10 to 20 years of race experience on each one of these people that have had to maneuver. There's no direct pathway. There's no, depending on what part of the world you live in, what part of the country you live in, obviously family and other financial resources, but just to try to make the decisions and to stick with it. I mean, we've all had to struggle to get where we are, but I just think the amount, people don't, you hear these highlighted results when somebody's introduced, but the journey of how hard it is to be able to just make the decisions, and then when you make the decisions to have the success. And I feel I've talked to so many drivers over the years, and they're just in such a hurry, and then they don't wait until they've had success of where they are. They just want to get to that next level. So I think these are examples of sticking it out and having success. So congratulations to all of you for doing that, and your families for supporting you to do that. So that's kind of, to me, a lesson that needs to be told more often, Okay, so I'm going to Isabella. We've heard a lot about you. We obviously knew you were very good and heard some good things from good folks. And when we had the opportunity, that we were approached by the F1 Academy. They were looking for a driver for what they call the wild card race event in Miami last year. We set up a test with the race team. Kiwi, thank you, Kiwi Motorsports. And you had the opportunity to do that, and you hadn't been in you really hadn't been in an open wheel car, right?
Yeah, go-karts was the only thing, but it had been probably 7 years since
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
in a go-kart. Yeah.
So she had the opportunity, and I heard from a few people how well you did. I mean, even Roberto Marino, who's like an ex-Formula One driver, was there and, you know, had a lot of glowing things to say about that. So, and then you had just come off the concussion. So I kind of, you know, I was going to talk about coming off of injuries, but we could be here all day talking about to all of you about that. And I think you've survived your injuries, so, and all of that. But just to share a little bit about that experience.
So Lynn said I did very well. That's kind of the end of the story, but I think I had the worst start to a test that you're being kind of evaluated on that you possibly could. I high-sided the car in turn 1. I ran off the racetrack and stalled it in turn 4, and then beached myself so hard they had to get a tow truck to pull the car out of the dirt in turn 8. So I didn't even finish 1 lap before they had to take the entire car apart to clean it out. It was something very different for me, and I think I started to overthink it a little bit at the start, which is why I spun out 3 times in 1 lap. But went back out, was still about 5 seconds off the pace from kind of the kid that they had there that we were being evaluated against, and just kind of kept working towards it, just learning a whole different discipline that I'm not used to, and third time kind of picked up another 2 or 3 seconds, and then by the 4th time I went out, I was kind of right on pace where I needed to be, and definitely started to feel more comfortable with the car and kind of just let my driving instincts take over. And by the 5th time we went out, I ended up holding it wide open through some corners that people weren't, and I think we all were a little scared that it would not work, but it ended up working, and I ended up ending the day the fastest by a couple seconds, and we ended up staying at the racetrack even longer just so we could do some low fuel runs and new tire runs just to keep throwing things at it. But at the end of the day, I have obligations with Toyota that kind of I went with instead. But yeah, it was a whirlwind of a test, and yeah, I don't think anyone could really start much worse than I did for that one.
Well, I mean, but I'm glad to see still a smile on your face because, you know, I know your pathway now is leading you with the Toyota support to go, you know, to go stock car racing, and that's all great. But to be able to jump into an open wheel car like that, coming off and do as well, I hope you're open-minded and keep your options open, just as a comment. But that leads to the gal that is running in the F1 Academy this year and was not available for that test, but at the same time, you had some experience and a lot of experience. And through the support of us putting in some good words, you were then selected to run as the wild card entry in the F1 Academy last year in Miami. And just share that, I guess, what it was like to run there, and then obviously, you know, how you're now going to be representing, you know, Haas racing and running in the F1 Academy for the full season in 2025.
So when I got the call kind of from Lynn first, and then also the F1 Academy to accept being the wild card in Miami, I would say first impressions were I had not been in a Formula car for about 4 or 5 years to that point, especially a junior Formula car, which for those of you that don't know, there's a certain trick to the Formula car to make it go fast, especially such a low horsepower one, so you really have to be on top of it. And as you guys can see, the more time you have in a vehicle, the quicker you are naturally. So kind of felt like I was being maybe thrown in the deep end a little bit, but the goal is just to make the most out of the weekend. And going into the weekend, obviously I had no expectations, especially from the F1 Academy side. There's been some backlash, I think.
Talk a little bit about that. I mean, there is obviously a lot of opinions about having an all-female racing series. So
yeah, and
we're kind of amongst friends here.
And it's obviously not the first all-female series. I mean, Panos had a series with all females, but it is the W series that came in a couple years before that was the first all-women Formula car series, and obviously that unfortunately probably didn't end up as well as they would have liked. And so when they started the F1 Academy, you never, as a driver, you never turn your back to any opportunity that presents itself. So going into the weekend, I had no expectations from the series itself. But once I got in there and just everything from the teams that ran the car, I was fortunate enough to run with Prema Racing that weekend. The structure that they put in for their drivers, not only from the team side, but F1 Academy, they have specific people in place to not only help you navigate around the series, but also help your performance, your mental side, and the infrastructure they make for these drivers is massive. And it's something I've never had in my racing career. I generally have went with the teams that I could afford or wanted me, which were not always the best, and I never had that solid base to have those high expectations of a team. So when I got to Prema and I went to their facility, which is huge in Italy, I couldn't believe the infrastructure they have. And when I walked in, they said to me, "We make F1 champions." And I just had never heard that kind of confidence.
Got your attention.
And I'd never heard that confidence from a race team before. And once I heard that, and I went to the weekend and I saw what the F1 Academy provided for the drivers, I knew that's where I wanted to be, because that's one of the things that I've lacked my whole racing career, is having such a solid professional team around me. And don't get me wrong, my teams have been amazing I've been with. But to go to Europe, it's a whole different level, as I'm sure Tati can attest to. It's a different mindset. And for me to get to go over there and feel that mindset and delve into that world, I'm kind of jumping into their world as, you know, the girls that have raced go-karts over there and have been in the Formula Car ladder series for years and testing. I'm definitely jumping into the deep end over there, but I'm really excited for that opportunity and to just take the most advantage of it I can, because after Miami, I was so excited about the weekend, and I knew right then and there after that weekend, I wrote it down. I said I wanted to be in F1 Academy full-time for 2025, and here I am, super excited.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to really wish you well. That's good. And by the way, Prema Racing is actually coming and racing, you know, setting up a team and running an IndyCar. So they're coming over to our side of the Atlantic. Well, Tatiana, you mentioned something, and I want to explore this more, because I am so thankful to you and proud of you to be so vocal about this and put yourself out there, because there are just certain design elements of a race car that are not favoring us, isn't even the right word, that aren't even allowing us to get the best out of it. I mean, I know that even in my day, I had my guys building false floors, and, you know, because my feet are small, and I mean, there's just things that, and there's adjustability, but not enough to really, you know, and that's finally being explored. And you have been very outspoken and have taken the lead by doing some of the testing. The chassis manufacturers are actually starting to pay attention. You know, everything now is on the steering wheel, and so we've got the issues of just the strength and the size of our hands, and the size of the steering wheels. I mean, it's just something that has to be explored, and so I want you to talk about that, what you've learned and what you're telling them, and let us, you know, share it with that, please.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting, and I guess like, you know, as a driver, when I was faced with like certain things I couldn't do, like for example, like the braking, you know, in a Formula car, you go and it's a very explosive movement. It has to be into a certain pressure, and the pressure has to come up very quickly. And I was struggling massively, and it was not because I was not strong enough, but maybe there were other factors that at the beginning I thought like, oh, maybe that's the way it is, you know. I'm gonna train as hard as I can, but it was not.
That's the way we all do it. This is the way it is, right? Yeah. And braking, so much time is made up or lost in braking.
Braking, so I was like, okay, I'm on the bridge of giving up on my dad. It's like, okay, let's put a GoPro on your feet, because I know how you train, and there's no way you cannot do this. And I was like, okay. You know, my dad from Colombia in a French team putting a GoPro camera in the pedals was like, oh God. So he put it, and then we saw that, you know, I'm at 37 and the guys were 42. So we put a piece of wood to find out if that helps to raise my feet and press with the right part of the foot. And the problem disappeared. And so it was like, wow, okay, I mean, I did all this training. It was not for nothing, but I could have speed up that process if I knew that just raising my feet would help me. Then you start to look at like the brake pumps. Or what if I put a smaller one? Oh, I can reach the pressure in a easier way. And I started to discover all these little things that were not, like nobody knew, like the engineers, they didn't have data from another woman driver. So I was trying to like sort of invent something that worked for me. And I've been privileged to work with other racing drivers, have them in the same car. And I started to see like a trend. The same happened with the steering wheel, like I was getting cramps and I couldn't talk on the radio because it was so thick. And it was not because I had no strength, it was because it was maybe not thought for me. And the same happened with like the way we need to train as racing drivers. Like we have a period every month, guys don't. So we don't build muscle as quickly as they do. We gotta train in a different way. It doesn't mean that we cannot reach, like, of course, we're not never gonna be as strong as them, but we can identify the areas that we really need to be strong in and make it work. And it's about having that research, about like you said, speaking out, because at the beginning I didn't want it to make that difference. But I think it's it's the way to go forward. Like what we've been experiencing is great to have female participating, and don't get me wrong, I'm very thankful for all the opportunities I had, but maybe they were not the best opportunities. I took them because they were there, but I think we need to step up to demand what we need from the cars, from the design of things, to be able to not just participate, but to be winning. We want to see women winning, and I think it's a great time to start to do that. I've been involved in the development of the new F3 car, the F2 car, that they're starting to run right now, and they took for the first time like female measurements and all these things on board. But I think it's about coming forward together, building that research, and I think that's going to be the answer to not just get more participation, but more women winning.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Dalara's been a good partner, and they build a lot of those chassis. And what I'm hearing is that there also could be an opportunity for more training for the women drivers, because I've tried, but you've got to demand, not ask, you've got to demand what you need to be able to maximize your performance. Demand in a nice way, talk good to the folks and say, come on, I need a little help here, but at the same time really make sure that you can, be fitted properly and get the maximum. So kudos to you, and I hope the drivers will reach out to you for anything that they need. So Laura, when I heard your story, and met you for the second time, because I do remember you came to driver development. I have your file. I actually remember that. Is that you made, to me, it felt like you made this choice to almost give up having a racing career because of the circumstances, but didn't choose to stop racing, but chose to put your effort into having this team and working with this team. And I mean, I love it because you're okay with it. You're still frickin' fast. I mean, you still are doing behind the wheel when you can, but I feel like you have a different balance, of your career as a race car driver and your devote. I mean, you drove the car here. I mean, not the car, but you hauled the car. You towed the car here from COTA by yourself to get the car on display. I mean, you kind of wear all the different hats, and so talk a little bit about that. I mean, your personal choice, I think is admirable, and
Thank you.
And you're living it, and it's authentic. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I mentioned, all of us at TBR, we met one another, just when we were working at BMW together, and we've just formed this very tight-knit group, and we believe in each other so much that we are willing to take some sacrifices for the greater good, and propelling this team to places that I know we're capable of going. So if I can use my talents behind the wheel to help advance all of us together, then I think it's a win-win situation for us. So yeah, I wear a lot of hats. I'm being introduced to parts of a race team and learning about business. I'm learning about, contracts that we sign to the send to the drivers before every race. So the legal side of things, I'm learning about accounting and budgets and profit and loss. And I see these numbers and I'm like, why would you ever start a race team? It's ridiculous.
This makes no sense.
Yeah. Something that I get to do before the race weekends is, event coordination. So just bringing in all of our team members from across the country, booking their flights, their hotels, and getting everybody together into one location with the cars and the trailers and all of the equipment. I think that's a really fun challenge. So when people, ask what can I do in racing? I want to be a part of racing. There are so many different ways of being involved, and there will become a day where I put the helmet on for the last time, right? It's a reality for all of us, unfortunately. I don't want to think about it, but I'm hoping that I'm putting myself in a position and putting Thunder Bunny Racing in a position that I can stay in the sport that I love so much and I've been passionate about since I was a little kid. So I had the opportunity at Pikes Peak come up a few years ago. So I was actually sitting on my porch at home. This was during COVID, so work at BMW was a little slow, and our chief instructor, he called me, and I look at my phone. I'm like, do I really want to pick this up right now? Because it's my boss, and I don't want to talk to him, but okay, I'll pick it up. And he asked if I wanted to go drive the pace car at the Pikes Peak Hillclimb, and just like you said, you don't say no to any opportunity, right? So I'm like, yeah, of course, that sounds great. And I didn't know anything really about the Pikes Peak Hillclimb, and I'm on the plane to Colorado, and I'm looking up YouTube videos of what's this race all about. I mean, I know they go really high up this mountain, and looking at IndyCar.
If you miss a corner, you go really down far.
You do. Has anybody driven the road Pikes Peak up to a few of you? So it's way scarier to drive slowly as in a van. That's when you have a chance to look down and you're like, that wouldn't hurt so bad. And then you look over there and you're like, oh, that wouldn't be too good. So it is, but race day, when you're behind the wheel of the car, it's just like being on a racetrack. You don't want to drop wheels. So the same thing on the mountain. I don't want to go flying off this cliff, so I'm not looking over there. I'm looking where I want to go, right? So I got to experience the week as the pace car driver that year, and I was driving a BMW. It was an M8 competition, just a street car from the local dealership, and I was able to experience the race week kind of as a competitor. They allowed me to go through each of the sections as the racers were, and I left that week and pretty much called the guys at TBR from the top of the mountain. I'm like, this is the craziest thing ever. We have to do this. So the next few months roll around, and one of our customers, his name is Jim, he had a BMW M2 CSR on order, and I'm like, well, I don't have a race car. Jim kind of has a race car. And I'm walking around my neighborhood with my phone in my hand, and I've got Jim's name up for probably 20 minutes, and I'm like, just suck it up and just press the button and call him and ask if if you can use his car for Pikes Peak. And he paused, but then he said, screw it, let's go do it. And that started our whole adventure at Pikes Peak. And the first year that I did it, it was a partial course, so weather is a definite contributing factor. As the locals say, the mountain decides, and that year the mountain decided for perfect weather all week, and then on the evening of the race day it snowed and iced over, so they moved the finish line a little bit lower to where it's safe. So I only ran a partial course the first year, and then the second year was similar conditions. It was terrible fog in the lower section, and so didn't go as fast as I know that we could have. And then this year, Pikes Peak introduced a new division called the GT4 division, and we've been racing the Super GT4 in the endurance series called WRL, and we've done really well with it. And with the rule set, it was super appealing to us as a team, And it was a fun class because they adopt the SRO rules. You can't do much to the car at all. So it puts a huge emphasis on the driver. So it was a very level playing field. And when I was in the M2, it was not a level playing field. So we had a really good year, and I was so lucky that I had some amazing partners jump aboard this year in Yokohama, Mobil 1, Shift Up Now. Without them, there's no way that I could have pulled this off. And the night of the race, you have to go to the mountain like at midnight. It's crazy. And I slept in the back of our rental car, and I poked my head up. I don't know what time it was like 6 o'clock, and I could finally see the summit. There was no weather, and I was the 5th car to go, so I got out of the car, put my suit on, we did the national anthem, and the officials told me go get in the car, and all of a sudden 10 minutes later I'm at the top of Pikes Peak and became the fastest woman this year. So that was a super amazing accomplishment.
I'm glad you got to show that, you know what I mean? You got to show kind of what you got as a driver.
So I'm very honored to have that title. I know that there's another lady in this room who could have very well been the fastest woman, but her car broke down. So I'm sure she's going to give me a run for my money next year. So
There's
I can't
always
wait
the next
for
race,
that.
the next year, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
So real quick, because we're about out of time, 2025, we know that we're going to be watching Courtney Crone in the F1 Academy. What are we going to be watching you in 2025? Do we know yet? You're not allowed to.
I know, but I can't tell anyone yet. It'll probably be like January.
Oh, so it's not like this week.
Like
or
after
that
Christmas.
After Christmas.
No.
But you are going to be running for Toyota. I mean, we can say
It will
that.
be for Toyota. Yep.
Yeah, in 2025.
Yes.
So Isabella, Robusto, look for her, whatever series you're going to announce that you get to do. Laura, you're just, Thunder
Yeah.
Bunny Racing will be everywhere, right?
We're going to try to be everywhere. So, yeah, if you need a team, hit up Thunder Bunny Racing. We'll talk. But next year, we're going to be moving up into SRO. So I'm going to be racing actually this car with my co-pilot, Alan Patton, in GT4 America. So very excited about that. And hopefully we'll be doing Pikes Peak again.
Cool. All right. Tatiana, come on. Let's make
wish
this
I
happen.
could share
Let's make this
something. I
happen.
know,
Come on, yeah.
right? It's such a tough sport in that sense of finding the right partners and sponsors, but it's never giving up. So
No,
hopefully,
you never give up. That's
no.
yeah.
Hopefully, I'll be driving sometime. next
Driving in IMSA or in IndyCar in this country, we hope you're.
Oh,
We can cheer for
me
you.
too. Hopefully, thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I think it's been, a great, I hope you've enjoyed these journeys and understanding the fortitude and the just how hard it is. I mean, everybody's talked about hard, but how it's also doable. I mean, that if you hang in there and you continue to stay on that journey and you find good partners or sponsors or good advisors that can help you and lift you at a moment when maybe you're pretty down, and just continue to work it so that everybody, I think, just needs to appreciate that, and I think we do. But I think hearing it right out of your mouths and the stories, and as I said, these are 4 super talents. So thank you very much. Thanks for your time and for coming. And yeah, on to the next. Okay. Yep.